Coming up on this Monday edition of Daybreak, Korea announces an expanded air defense zone, including a reef off its southern coast, overlapping China's recently extended zone that covers a rock controlled by Korea. Pro-EU protesters in Ukraine topple a symbolic statue of Lenin in Kiev, demanding the government step down after it backed away from strengthening ties with the regional bloc amid Russian opposition. Plus, Thailand's main opposition MPs vowed to resign, calling for the ousting of Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra, widely thought to be influenced by her brother and formerly deposed leader Thaksin. The Prime Minister suggests a referendum to resolve the crisis. Daybreak begins now.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Daybreak on Monday, December 9th. I'm Choi Yusun in Seoul. We start with the latest development in the airspace dispute here in Northeast Asia. Korea will expand its air defense zone next week in a way that will see it overlap with similar zones drawn up by China and Japan. Seoul says it consulted with all relevant parties and doesn't expect its decision to cause too much of a stir. Our Kim Young-gil has the details.
Korea's defense ministry announced on Sunday that it has extended its air defense zone to cover 2 small islands and a submerged rock called Yeodo in the country's southern waters.
Korea's air defense identification zone has been revised to be accepted internationally and to be in line with the country's flight information region, which does not overlap with neighboring countries.
The ministry said Korea's new expanded air defense identification zone, or KDIZ, coincides with the flight information region that includes the southern islands of Marado and Hongdo, which are controlled by Seoul, as well as Yeodo, a rock claimed by Korea and China and controlled by Korea. The ministry said the new zone will take effect from December 15th. Air defense identification zones are not territorial claims, but they mark the airspace that countries feel are important to monitor. The announcement comes in response to China's decision late last month to create a new air zone that overlaps those of Korea and Japan, including Korea's Yeodo and a set of disputed islands between Tokyo and Beijing. This unilateral move sparked a backlash from Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington. Seoul said its decision was unlikely to provoke a similar reaction.
We have explained our position to related countries, and overall they're in agreement that this move complies with international regulations and is not an excessive measure.
The U.S. State Department said it appreciates Korea's commitment to implement the new air zone in a manner consistent with international practice and respect for the freedom of overflight and other internationally lawful uses of international airspace. There was no immediate response from China on the move, but last Friday, Beijing said Korea's expansion would comply with international laws and conventions and that it would stay in communication with Seoul. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Former presidential candidate and independent lawmaker An Chol-soo has appointed 4 co-chairmen who will lead his preparatory committee to lay the groundwork for the formation of his new political party. Former Science Minister Park Ho-gun, medical doctor and civil activist Yoon Jang-hyun, former Democratic Party floor leader Kim Yo-seok, former lawmaker and former head of Hyundai Motor Lee Ge-an were named on Sunday as the 4 co-leaders of the new committee. An said he and the 4 chairs will travel around the country to hold policy discussions and seek out new talent for the party. An also said his new party will take part in the next local legislative elections set for next June. Korea's ruling and main opposition parties are set to clash this week over the details of 2 special committees set up to reform the scandal-ridden spy agency and to set new rules for local elections. Regarding the reform committee for the nation's spy agency, both parties are set to agree that the National Intelligence Service should not be able to intervene in politics and should strengthen its intelligence activities against North Korea and any terror threats. However, both parties are reportedly still at odds over specific details, such as the extent of domestic intelligence activities and budget controls. As for the Political Reform Committee, there are concerns the two camps will only focus on their own interests in the next local elections rather than focusing on setting up fair rules on a level playing field. Both committees were set up last week, bringing to an end weeks of political deadlock. The ousting of Chang Song-taek, the uncle of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, did not likely rise from his power struggle with Choi Ryong-hae, the director of North Korean Army's Politburo. Speaking to reporters Sunday, a senior lawmaker from South Korea's ruling party, Yoon Sang-yeon, said conflict among agencies from overseas business projects two of Chang's aides were engaged in possibly led to Kim Jong-un ordering their execution. The South Korean lawmaker added Chang's challenging of Kim's authority also likely played part in the uncle's removal. As for Chang's wife and the leader's aunt Kim Kyung-hee, Yoon said the couple is known to have been separated and there wasn't much she could do to help her husband. It's been almost a year since President Park Geun-hye came to power, and recent economic figures show the Korean economy under President Park has made better progress than Japan under the leadership of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in terms of current account surplus and growth rate. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Some key indicators show the Korean economy has fared better than the Japanese economy over the last 12 months. The International Monetary Fund expects Korea to continue its gradual pace of recovery by growing 3.7% next year and 2.8% this year. But the IMF forecasts the Japanese economy will lose steam, expanding just 1.2% in 2014 after growing 2% this year. Under that forecast, Korea's economic growth rate will exceed Japan's by 0.8 percentage points this year and 2.5 percentage points next year. Korea's current account surplus in particular is expected to surpass Japan's for the first time this year. Korea is forecast to log a current account surplus of $63 billion for the entire year, according to the nation's central bank, $3 billion more than Japan. Only 5 years ago, Korea was no match for Japan, a major exporting nation with the current account surplus 5 times larger than that of Korea. Analysts, however, point out that the set of economic policies laid out by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is much more clear-cut than Korea's. They say while Japan pushed hard with its economic program known as Abenomics to defeat deflation, more than 100 pending bills aimed at boosting the Korean economy are gathering dust in Parliament. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
The U.S. government and global industry are expected to impose trade pressure on Korea after Seoul expressed an interest in joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership. According to diplomatic sources on Sunday, U.S. automobile industries are pressing the Obama administration to discuss allegations of exchange rate rigging and non-tariff barriers if Korea formally joins the TPP. Earlier, American Automotive Policy Council President Matt Blunt said the TPP should ensure current and future TPP members do not use it to undermine market access commitments. He added that a number of domestic policies dealing with labor and competition are creating a very difficult business environment for foreign companies operating in Korea, saying the U.S. should leverage TPP to ensure Korea fulfills its commitments to create an open economy.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiations.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a...
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday that pro-Europe protesters in Kiev have toppled a statue of Lenin as thousands continue to protest against the government and its position on Europe and Russia. Kim Min-ji has the latest.
In a highly symbolic development, protesters in the Ukrainian capital have knocked down a statue of Soviet state founder Vladimir Lenin. Once the monument fell to the ground, demonstrators decapitated it and attacked it with hammers. Hundreds of thousands had gathered in Kiev Sunday for the protest, dubbed the March of the Million, to express their anger towards President Viktor Yanukovych and to pressure him to reject plans for closer ties with Russia. Protesters waved the flags of Ukraine and the European Union as they continued to protest at Kiev's Independence Square, while others tried to block access to the presidential building. The protests, now into week 3, were sparked by the government's last-minute decision to suspend plans to sign an integration pact with the European Union, which the opposition says was the result of Russian pressure. President Yanukovych said the country was not ready for such move and that the deal would have been too costly for the Ukrainian economy. Sunday's protests were further fueled by a meeting between President Yanukovych and Russian President Vladimir Putin last Friday. The opposition claims the meeting took place as part of preparations to join a customs union led by Moscow. Meanwhile, the European Commission says EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton will visit Kiev in the coming days to try and find a way of diffusing the crisis. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Amid the deepening political unrest in Thailand, Thai Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra has proposed holding a referendum to resolve the conflict in her country. In a televised statement on Sunday, she said she'd follow the will of what the majority of people want. Her offer came as she rejected protesters' demand to form a People's Council, saying it was not constitutional. She said she could resign if the majority of Thais agree with the proposal to set up the council. Meanwhile, Thailand's main opposition party has walked out of parliament, saying it can no longer work with what it calls an illegitimate government. Protesters have been on the streets for weeks and surrounded government offices in Bangkok, calling for the Prime Minister to step down, accusing her of being a proxy for her exiled brother and former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. A team of inspectors of the International Atomic Energy Agency has visited Iran's Arirang heavy water reactor for the first time in more than 2 years. Iran state media reports that 2 of the IAEA inspectors held their one-day inspection on Sunday and were scheduled to leave for Vienna later in the day. The visit comes just 2 weeks after a 6-month interim deal was reached between Iran and world powers over Tehran's nuclear program. Iran has agreed not to commission or fuel the Arirang reactor during that time. Some suspect Iran could attempt to use the Arirang reactor for the reprocessing of plutonium, a potential step towards a nuclear weapon. For decades, scientists have been searching for neutrino particles from outer space. Now, an international team of physicists, including scientists from Korea, has discovered the first solid evidence of their existence, opening a new window on the universe. Our Son Jung-in tells us more about this groundbreaking discovery.
2 kilometers beneath the vast surface of a glacier at the South Pole lies IceCube, an observatory where the first interstellar neutrinos were identified. The observatory detects the tiny flashes of blue light emitted when neutrinos interact with molecules in the ice. These nearly massless subatomic particles have no charge and travel through space almost undetected without reacting to any substance. But 1 in a million or so of the neutrinos that originate in the Earth's atmosphere or on the Sun collides with the nucleus of hydrogen and oxygen atoms in ice, producing a nuclear reaction. The researchers at IceCube have observed 28 high-energy particle events and estimate about half of these came from outside our solar system.
We now think we have seen for the first time events that originate from beyond our solar system. And this will allow us in the future to observe the universe with a new messenger particle and establish a new field.
But they say the number of events is still too small to allow them to pinpoint the origin of the neutrinos.
It's rather obvious where do they come from. That's what we are now trying to figure out, both by getting more neutrinos and by doing different analyses that will help us decipher the problem.
IceCube was created with 250 physicists and engineers from 11 countries, including Korea, and the findings were published in the journal Science. 손정인, Arirang News.
Frigid winds and freezing temperatures are endured by most during the winter season. But for people who suffer from chronic sinusitis, the onset of the colder weather is a source of runny noses, headaches, and sleepless nights. But Korean medical researchers say they may have finally found the key to unlocking a possible cure for this widespread condition. Our Paul Lee reports.
32-year-old Han Sung-chung has been diagnosed with chronic sinusitis for the last 8 years or so. Han says he dreads the onset of the winter season as his symptoms take a turn for the worst.
It's been hard to get a good night's sleep. I often wake up and feel sleepy during the day. I can't seem to concentrate. Even at work, I have to keep wiping my nose.
Sinusitis, a condition that leads to painful inflammation of the sinuses, affects nearly 1.9 million people in Korea every year. Current treatments and even surgeries only provide limited relief for symptoms, but a joint medical study here in Korea has recently raised hopes for a potential cure. Researchers discovered that so-called natural killer cells in the body were defective in a group of chronic sinusitis patients between 2003 and 2011.
We found that natural killer cells play an important role in the abnormal immune response that leads to a recurrence of sinusitis. This new discovery is part of very meaningful research.
The goal now is to find a way to repair these damaged immune cells, which are also linked to asthma and blood disorders.
We're moving in the direction of restoring the impaired functions of natural killer cells. If we continue on this path, there's a bright future for effective treatment for chronic sinusitis.
The research findings were published last month in the scientific journal PLOS ONE and provide key knowledge for diagnosing and perhaps treating this chronic condition. Paul Yi, Arirang News.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off in figure skating. Now, an amazing comeback performance from figure queen Kim Yeon-ah, who finished first during the Golden Spin of Zagreb with 204.49 points total. But it didn't end there. Now, what was once a plain white ice rink turned into what looked like a purple lake as she delivered yet another amazing performance with her gala show. The crowd turned emotional as Kim Yeon-ah showed that despite coming back from a foot injury, she's still the world's best figure skater ahead of the 2014 Sochi Winter Games. And moving on to football, where many football fans here in the nation stood up past midnight on Saturday to watch the 2014 Brazil World Cup drawing. And for the Taeguk Warriors, it looked to be an easy draw ahead of the Brazil World Cup. With Korea being drawn in Group H with Belgium, Russia, and Algeria, many fans believe that it is one of the easiest groups out there. However, Korea is still ranked the lowest amongst the four nations, with Belgium in 11th, Russia in 22nd, and Algeria in 26th. And even if they make it out of the group stages, the group of death winners will face off against Korea, with Portugal and Germany being the likely nations. And moving on to golf, where the KLPGA season kicked off at the Swinging Skirts World Ladies Masters in Taiwan. While the event was packed with some of the top names in women's golf, it was a 16-year-old who claimed the trophy in the end. Just 47 days since turning pro, 16-year-old Lydia Ko dominates all three rounds of the event as she finishes with 11 under par overall to claim her first title as a pro. Ko, despite playing with some of the top players like Park In-bi, Ryu So-yeon, and Yanni Sang, never looked nervous on the course as she claims the first of the many trophies she'll win in the future. And now over to Berlin, where the fourth round of the Speed Skating World Cup took place. Now, with Lee Sang-hwa sweeping all the gold medals over on the women's side, Mo Tae-bum finally got a taste of the gold medal finish as he finished first in the 500 meters men's finals, coming at a time of 34.87 seconds. That's his second gold medal at the World Cup this season and a first in the 500-meter event. And so with that said, moving on to some Sunday's KBL action as the Goyang Orions pulls off an upset win over the Ulsan Mobis Phoebus 84-74, with the Seoul Samsung Thunders beating the struggling Wonju-dongmu Promi 88-85. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Seoul SK Knights take on the Changwon LG Sakers. Of course, going into the game here, first quarter of the game, SK off to a nice start, taking an 18-15 lead before Aaron Haynes' 10 points in the first half helped them take a comfortable 37-32 lead going into halftime. Both teams neck and neck in the third quarter of the game, but here come the LG Sakers, absolutely dominating SK on the paint. Outscores them 19-7 in the fourth quarter as they rally back to take this game 69-62. And now moving on to some VLeague action as GS Cartex beat Hunguk Insurance Life Pink Spiders 3-1 with IBK Altos, beating the struggling Hyundai Hill State 3-1 as well over on the women's side. Meanwhile, over on the men's side, KEPCO Vic Storms beat Hyundai Capital Skywalkers 3-2 in a close match. So with that, let's take a look at a big matchup here. Uricard taking on the Korean Air Jumbos. That's just an absolutely close game all around as Korean Air Jumbos takes the first set 26-24 before Uricard comes back with the second set 25-22. The third set is a close one as well, with both teams going deuces a few times before Uricard takes the third 28-26. Korean Air tried to force this to the fifth set, and they do as they take the fourth 25-15. Michael Sanchez of Korean Air Jumbos putting up 50 attack points in this game, but the fifth and final set go to Uricard, who triumphs with a 15-13 set win and a 3-2 victory. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Happy Monday morning to you. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your latest weather forecast. Well, after a mild stretch of weather we had last week, it's time to get ready for a cold snap this week. But today shouldn't be too bad as morning lows are starting out at 4, which is slightly higher than yesterday here in Seoul and surrounding areas. And afternoon highs will be similar to a tad cooler. But wind will intensify as we go through a day, and we have rain in store across the most parts of the nation in the morning hours, and it will rain till the evening. Now, we are expecting up to 5 to 20 millimeters of rainfall today, and it will rain from the western parts of the nation and will gradually expand to other areas. But it will snow in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do. In fact, heavy snow advisory could be issued in those regions in the morning hours, so take precautions on facility maintenance and please keep an eye on the future weather forecast. Now, the rain will drag down the temperature starting tomorrow. Things will get a lot cooler, and it looks like we have another band of snow and rain in the forecast in the middle of the week, which will bring down the temperatures even lower. So we gotta get ready for the cold and freezing weather. But now, here are the readings for today. Now, morning low in Seoul is starting out at 4, but it will peak to 6. Daegu will top out at 11, and Gwangju reaches 10, while Busan climb into 15 with a few drizzles. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju will have highs reaching to 16 in the afternoon. Daejeon and Dokdo will reach at 9 and 12, while Mount Kumgang stays in the chilly side. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me at this hour. Don't forget to pack a small umbrella before heading out, and hope you have a wonderful day.
And those are the stories we have for you this hour. Thank you for watching.